G'day guys, thanks for watching as always. Today we're doing something pretty cool. In this video we're making a lure that we will be sending overseas to a very good friend of mine down in Australia. We're making a lure for Barramundi. However, you could use this lure design for any other type of fishing that you do. But this one's going down under. Now, I was lucky enough to catch my first Barramundi when I was 14. For first time I visited Australia. And after I moved there, I was even luckier to catch many more awesome barra. So yeah, pretty neat. I've made lures before for Barramundi, so I figured I'd hit up my mate Johnny, who is a fishing guide in Australia, and see if he was keen to test out a good barra lure. So let's get started, guys. As always, we're just starting off with a piece of wood. This is poplar wood. It's a little bit heavier than what I usually use, but since it's a lot smaller of a lure that I make than I'm used to, I just want to make sure that the wood strength is not an issue. So we're just roughly sketching where we want the outline of the lure to be. Now we can get going. Now we only want to saw or carve out whatever you have at hand, the outlining, because we want to have flat sides so we can later on saw a straight slot for the diving lip. Now if that sounds a bit fuzzy to you, it'll make sense in a minute, but we're first just carving out a straight outline. There you have it. So now we've got a flat side for this piece of wood to sit on so we can make a straight cut with either a miter box, but if you have a bandsaw, that's even better. Would make things much quicker, and then obviously you would have had this shape out of the wood a lot quicker too. But I unfortunately don't have the luxury of that, so carving it is. Now here I'm just determining where the center of the lure is. I do it by eye, but if you're not super confident in doing it that way, please do grab a ruler or a tape measure or whatever, so you can determine where the center of it all is. Reason why this is so important is you want your lure to be really well balanced. That's one of the key features of a good lure, is a good balance. That means that everything is in line, not just the weights, but also your hook hangers and your toe point. There's many ways to do it. This is a very silly way. It's not super accurate, but tying around some line would help you at least a little bit, I guess. I think another popular way is to have a pencil or a marker on an elevated area and point it against the side of the lure, and then just turn the lure around over it. Yeah, that doesn't sound great. Description is very poor on my behalf. Sorry I didn't do it that way, but it's just another way. Now here we're determining where the diving lip slot is going to be. We do want a pretty deep slot because barramundi fishing is pretty tough on your gear, and we don't want any weaknesses in the lure, so we want that plexiglass that we'll be using as the diving lip to be inserted fairly deep into the lure body. Now you can see there's a very straight slot, and that was only doable because we had a flat side for the lure to sit on. Now that's all done, we can actually start rounding off the rest of the lure. Now it actually makes sense. If that lure body was round when we tried to cut the straight slot, that would have been practically impossible. You would have ended up with a wonky slot and a diving lip that wouldn't fit in straight, and a lure that would just spin in the water instead of actually sit straight and be well balanced. Take your time with your carving. It's better to go too slow than too fast. You can always make a cut extra, but you can never add wood back onto the lure obviously, so yeah, just take your time. Practice makes perfect. Then we just go over to the sanding so we can take out the rough edges as per usual. 60 or 80 grit will do, and to smooth it all out, 320 grit is my favorite, but pick whatever you prefer. I guess it's also kind of dependent on the wood that you use, but everyone's got their own personal preference, I guess. So that's looking pretty good. I've also made some indicator holes where the weight holes and hook hangers are going to be. Here I'm just inserting the weights into the belly. Rule of thumb is to never drill a hole past the halfway line through the body, because then the weight will be coming through the back of the lure, and it's not going to balance your bait out very well. So just keep the weight in the belly and you'll be fine. Now here we transition into a process that is, again, very optional. I know I repeat myself a lot in these videos, but I do like carving out a face. But a good lure does not need the face, it doesn't need any color. A good lure just needs a good balance and a good vibration output. But it does make it very rewarding when it comes out nice. As per usual, I use 3D eyes to determine where the eye sockets are going to be. I align them and then I'm able to draw a circle around them. Makes it easy for me, especially when you have like a rounded face. It's very hard to determine that with a stencil, since it's all three-dimensional and stuff. If it would have been flat, it would have been easy. It's a little bit different this time. There we go, carving out the face. Pretty straightforward, just in like all the other videos. I've noticed that I do carve out very similar faces on each lure, so it's pretty neat that you can kind of create your own style that you like if you do it more than once. Very tedious work, that's alright. This lure is not for me, so hopefully the receiving individual will like the lure. On top of that, we also do some scale carving. I'm not very good at this one, so I do like to make some outlinings on the lure. Give me a bit of an indication of where I have to make the cut. I've still got a lot of practice to do with this because I haven't done it too often. With foil it's a lot easier because it's flat. With a lure it's all rounded, so a bit tricky. But again, better off trying than never learning anything. Alright, now we're towards the back of the lure. I skipped the whole part because it's all the same. It does give you a bit of an idea of how tedious the process can be, but oh well. As long as it looks good afterwards, I guess. Now, as you may or may not know, I don't actually own a airbrush. However, I do like to contrast the lure in certain areas a little bit, so I like to darken out the eye sockets with this whiteboard marker. I like whiteboard markers because it's easy to rub it in. Permanent markers usually are just very hard to transition colors into. Whereas this I can put on and kind of rub it in the scale pattern, and it's a nice smooth transition from wood to a darker color, I guess. Looks pretty good. Again, very much optional. I do this before I dip it in the urethane. This ink doesn't react with urethane, but it does react with epoxy, so make sure you got a urethane coat over the ink first. Now here we've dipped it in the urethane, and this is where the designing of the diving lip starts. It's a pretty straightforward process, and I do it as follows. I cut out a piece of paper bigger than the size of the diving lip I want to make. And first I insert it into where the diving lip is going to be, and then I'll be able to draw the outline of the face onto the paper. Sad thing is I didn't actually end up with this particular design, but this is all I recorded on video, and since the process of making a diving lip is the same, it doesn't really matter too much. Just make sure that you've got the exact outlining of the face. And when you are in the process of cutting out the diving lip out of plexiglass or whatever plastic you use, you're better off having too wide of a diving lip than too narrow, because you can always obviously carve or sand off a little bit of the material. So I'm doing just the outline of the face here, and I think I'll also do a bit of a line of where I want the diving lip to go. This diving lip was unfortunately a little bit too narrow. I needed a bit wider of a diving lip to actually get some good action out of the lure. Since it's a suspending bait, it actually is a little bit heavy, and so you need a bit more of a bigger swimming lip to get that action going. So this is where I fold the paper in half. Now I lost my scissors, so I didn't have them at hand, but was able to find them a little bit later, so that's alright. Anyway, fold the paper in half, and then it's just time to cut it out. And folding it in half right on the halfway line between the 2 points of where the face outline is gives you a nice symmetrical shape that is dead center with the face. Doesn't get a whole lot simpler than that. It's pretty neat because this way you can definitely it's easy to experiment with different diving lips and different lures. See what works for you, see what doesn't. As you can see, there's the blueprint for the diving lip. This one wasn't good, but the idea is still the same. Now it's just time to convert it onto the plexiglass. I unfortunately do not have a bandsaw, but this is an ideal situation where you could need one. I just use a grinder tool on my Dremel, but I guess you can also use a drill. I've used a drill before, just to drill out the outline. That worked for me as well. It's actually a little bit faster than the grinder tool, so and a little bit more accurate too. Either way, here we're just transferring it with a permanent marker onto the plexiglass. And then it's just a matter of carving it out, or cutting it, or sawing it, whatever works. And again, if you don't have a bandsaw, it's better to leave some excess material so you can sand it off, rather than having not enough. Cool. So one problem that you'll definitely have when you make lures with diving lips is that you can't get an action out of the lure, even though you've done everything right. You balanced it well, the diving lips fixed in well, but the thing is not swimming. It's barely moving. Here's the thing that you have to do. Make sure that your connection eye is as close to the diving lip as possible. 1 millimeter makes all the difference. Now what I noticed when I tested this one out, again, I already saw it coming, didn't work, and when I turned the connection eye 90 degrees, I saw that the action started coming, actually getting into the lure when it started swimming. So that meant that I had to bend the connection eye a little bit down so the toe point was close to the diving lip. You might think, what does that 2 millimeters make for a difference? But trust me, it makes all the difference. It went from not swimming at all to having a great swimming action. Now I didn't heat up the screw eye because I didn't want to weaken the metal. But now the screw eye is sitting really close onto the diving lip. As a matter of fact, I can't actually get the diving lip in when I turn the screw eye straight, which you'll see here. That screw eye, the diving lip only fits in because I've turned the screw eye sideways. So we had to have a little bit of a solution for that. One thing you obviously can do is just saw a slot in length. However, what I did was I grabbed another screw eye, heated it up on the heaters. Sorry, jeez, bit fuzzy today, guys. Sorry. And I just kind of melted a slot into where I needed to be. Here you see me indicate where that slot has to be. And that was that. Sad thing is I was actually using a different diving lip than I actually ended up with. But here you see the idea. I've melted the slot in there. It doesn't go all the way through. Created a little bump, but that's easy enough to sand off. I have to clean the lip up anyway because it's still rough. But here you can see that slot accommodates the connection point. Perfect. In order to get the diving lip out now, I had to turn the screw eye because they hold each other in place, which is pretty neat. But anyway, it worked out. Alright, now I did have a bit of a mishap with the paint. I had some glitter paint, but that all clogged up and it kind of went everywhere. So all of a sudden my lure was covered in a really thick coat of glitter in certain parts and nothing in other parts. So I had to sand it all off, but it doesn't matter too much. This is the first part of making a lure for Australia, which will be the longest part. I'll have to clean the whole lure up. But it gives you an idea of the most important part of the process. So here I'm adding a little bit of color again to the eye sockets because they got just soaked in glitter. I don't know if it's urethane or whatever coating it is, what base it is, but covered the whole lure, went everywhere. So that was unfortunate, but we can always just sand that off. It's gonna be okay. I do like to always put the 3D eyes in, see if it all fits, and see what it's going to look like. Again, don't think too much of the glitter stains that are on there. It's kind of embarrassing, but it looks good for the rest. Time for a pull test pretty soon, I'd say. Would have to add the screw eyes and the hooks. One thing that I'll definitely have to let you know, this lure was meant to be suspending for the salt water, so it will be slowly sinking in the fresh. It's not too bad if it slowly sinks in the salt, but I want it to be a very slow moving lure. You know, the toughest days when barramundi fishing, you quite often require a lure that puts out a good presence and vibration and movement, while not retrieving it super fast, really giving that the fish an option to look at your lure. Sometimes I remember pausing a lure for like 10 seconds and then getting the bite. So having a lure that moves slow, that you're able to retrieve slow, is definitely a big asset in barramundi fishing. And that's what we've done here. We've balanced the whole thing out with the heaviest of terminal tackle for this size lure. Got some nice heavy duty saltwater resistant hooks, thick split rings. Pretty neat. Swims pretty good, pretty happy with it. Pretty sure that will catch some good barra. This is kind of like your run-of-the-mill barramundi hard body lure. You can get them bigger, a little bit smaller, but this will catch anything from your little rat barramundi. I'm sure there's somewhere in Australia there will be a meter plus barramundi that wouldn't mind engulfing this either. So, as you see, slowly sinking. There's obviously fresh water in the pool. There's a nice little wiggle to it. Yeah, that should catch some fish for sure. So next video will be the paint job and the epoxy coat, and hopefully some footage from Australia. Might be in a while because I've got close barramundi season. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Cheers.